All right. Well, again, I'm sorry. We can go, and if you're like, let's do it again, I'm happy to double dip since I am the one who failed you.
No, you're good. You're good. I was just here chilling, getting ready.
Okay. So where about you're in Denver then?
Yeah, yeah. I actually am like 5 minutes from Denver Seminary, so
Oh,
super
okay.
close to it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll ping you. I think it'll happen. I'm not entirely sure, but for years I taught a class where we would go to the Sundance Film Festival. And then after COVID happened and they didn't have the festival for a few years, I went occasionally, but not with the class. But now that it's moving, I don't know if you heard, but it's moving to Boulder. So in January, for the first time,
Oh.
it'll be in Boulder, and so I'm thinking about what we want to do in terms of like, doing a class that kind of runs alongside the festival, and basically just watch a bunch of movies, talk to other people and artists and stuff about film and theology and whatnot. And they usually have a sweet like midnight screening series that
Oh, nice.
horror and like a lot of like my early days of like if I ever was going to watch a horror movie, it I basically didn't, but at Sundance I would, and so a few of my favorite horror films were premiered at Sundance. But anyway, so it'll be there in January, and I'll probably at least come out and do a scouting trip. So
Oh,
I will
that'd be
ping you
cool.
if I
Yeah.
do. Then we could go maybe catch a couple horror flicks at a midnight screening.
Yeah, heck yeah. That sounds fun. That'd be sick.
No, well, cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks for chatting with me. We could just jump right into the interview or whatever you want to
Yeah,
call it.
yeah.
Um,
Conversation.
but yeah, you want to introduce yourself and like kind of your background and what you do and why I have you on the podcast as a theology and horror guy.
Sure. Well, my name is Cutter Callaway, and my for my day job, I wear a few hats, but primarily I'm a professor at Fuller Seminary, and I actually have a couple titles. But at the end of the day, I teach in our two schools. We have one school of theology, and then we have another school of psychology, and I have an appointment in both, in part because I have degrees in both psychology and theology. And on the theology side, it is a cultural, it's theology and cultural studies. And so most of what I do, research, teaching, writing, that sort of stuff, is kind of bringing together how theology and psychology give us lenses to understand, interpret, engage cultural artifacts of some kind. The last few years, for any number of reasons that we can talk about if you want, I kind of went down the path of thinking about horror films. And did a podcast called Be Afraid. Came out, the first season came out a couple of years ago. We did a follow-up. I'll probably do another special episode or two here in the fall. Um, and that has been produced a book version of the podcast, also called Be Afraid. And it comes out in late September, just in time for the spooky season. So
Yeah,
I
that's
take it
right.
that's why I'm with you, thinking theology, psychology, focused on horror films. Well, and mostly film and TV. There's a lot of great work out there on horror literature and other things, but my primary focus is usually TV and film.
Yeah. What was it that like kind of suddenly made you interested in horror a couple years ago?
Oh, well, there are a few overlapping things I'd say. And the reason I say there's a few overlapping is because if it's just one, I don't think it would have been enough to convince me.
Hmm.
I kind of was a lifelong scaredy cat and would even say to people like, yeah, a lot of people in the sort of the Christian world, they make these sort of arbitrary moralizations about film, for example. And they're like, oh, you can't watch X or this is inherently. I'm like, well, why? And most of my approach is to say, oh, listen, we all got sensitivities, different kind of preferences. Don't like project those on everybody else, but know yourself well enough to know what bothers you, what sticks with you, what affects you. And if so, then make that discerning question of like, maybe that's not for me. And I always use that excuse as to why I wouldn't watch horror because for the most part, it affected me. Certain ones, especially, would just stay with me, give me nightmares, make it impossible to sleep, at times, which means they were working. So I stayed away from them. But around the time of COVID or just coming out of COVID, a few kind of things happened simultaneously. One, it had been a while that I had known a number of filmmakers, some pretty prominent ones in the industry, who were making pretty well-known horror films that were Christian, not the horror films, the person.
Hmm.
And I always found that
Can you say
fascinating.
what movies they worked on?
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I'll just name it. So Scott Derrickson is a
Oh, no
friend.
way.
Yeah, yeah. So any of his stuff, Exorcism of Emily Rose, Sinister. I always say Insidious, but it's Sinister is his. Um,
Hmm.
he of course did Black Phone 1 and 2, did Doctor Strange as well, but his core uh, uh, films are in that sort of horror genre, and
And he's a Christian?
and he's a Christian, yeah. And he actually, if anybody, there are a couple. Scott Teems is another guy. He made a number of things. He's done a Firestarter. He's done Hellraiser. He did the new Exorcist that just came out last year, the kind of reboot, which got panned a little bit, but not because of
Yeah.
Scott. So anyway, and so those are some of the bigger names, and then a number of other sort of like indie filmmakers and others that were making films that maybe not everybody saw, but some like really interesting horror films. And all these people are Christians, not all horror films, but all the people that I knew. So I was going, huh. And Scott, not teams, but Derrickson in particular, really, I think, finally convinced me that for him, he's like, this is actually the most spiritual genre that exists. It's one of the
Yeah.
few that it's like, hey, there is evil, and that evil is affecting us in ways that are not good, and we need to resist it.
Mm.
And often, not always, but especially in the supernatural horror genre, it's like usually the only people that have the tools and resources to combat that evil are religious people, even more
Yeah.
specifically Christians, right? Like, because most people just have it's not in their, wherewithal to know how to address it. And I was like, that's interesting. So that I was always like on the verge of like, okay, maybe Scott's right. I need to address this. Okay. Well, then post-COVID happens, and here in the US, a couple of horror films, Black Phone being one of them, essentially saved the theaters. There was a point where it's like every theater is about to close down, and a couple of specific horror films came out that were actually successful in terms of box office. And I said, well, that's interesting, because there's something about being scared together as opposed to like
Mm.
remotely that it
Yeah.
seemed like people were hungry for. They weren't necessarily hungry to go together and watch a rom-com, but they were hungry to go get scared. I'm like, huh. And that was purely just reading the box office receipts post-COVID. And then 3 or 4 years after the shutdowns, basically every year the percentage of box office returns of the horror genre just keeps doubling, and it's now at like 35% of total ticket sales are all horror films. And up
Mm.
to the point that
Wow.
now, this last Oscar, right, there were like 3 or 4 horror films that were up for Oscars. Weapons and The
Sinners.
Substance and yeah, so like Sinners, yes, exactly. So now they're even getting critical acclaim, right? So I looked at myself and I said, okay, you claim to be an expert, not just in contemporary popular culture, but in film. And you cannot ignore a full third of the films being produced and consumed
Yeah.
and call yourself an expert. And so I was like, I basically challenged my own expert credentials and said, you have to do this. And even though you don't like it, you're resistant to it, it's going to be good for you to just dive in and just do exposure therapy essentially. And so that was the reason, those sort of overlapping threads. And I just said, I'm going to look at it like an anthropologist and just go, what's happening here? Especially because it'd be interesting to hear how you respond to it, because I had so many friends before then and relatives, whatever, that just loved it. And it didn't seem to affect them negatively in the way that I always imagined it did for me. And that too is my fascination of like what's happening, what are they doing that allows them to consume this in a way that it seems actually productive. It seems actually fun, enjoyable, where me, I'm like terrorized by it. And so that was another
Hmm.
question driving me to kind of dive in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So do you feel like you enjoy it now, or is it
Um,
still? hard for you at times?
No, it depends. So one thing that I think I've learned, and it should have been obvious, and it is to anybody who's a horror fan anyway, but there's a range, right? Like there's a range of quality, there's a range of even subgenres of what they're asking of you and what they're doing. And so depending upon the film, my response ranges. But I would say at the very least, I've walked away far more appreciative of the genre. So like that's number one.
Hmm.
Uh, Number two, I will also admit, because I'm now quite a bit more well versed in the tropes and the different things, it is actually less affecting. It doesn't scare me as much
Yeah.
because I'm, yeah, I've seen it before. I saw that coming, you know. Whereas if you
Hmm.
just occasionally see it, I think it does surprise you in ways that you weren't prepared for. And
Hmm.
that makes sense. And so I wouldn't call that a sort of like you get not conditioned, but what's the word? Where you kind of become inoculated to it, but in a
Like
negative way.
desensitized a little
Yeah,
bit.
thank you. Yes, desensitized. So there is a bit
Yeah.
of that, but not in this, not in like a negative way, right? It's I want to talk about it in like a positive desensitization, where
Hmm.
you have the capacity to kind of sit with some of these difficult, gritty, violent, like scary things, and not be like shook by it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a capacity that I've developed that both allows me to appreciate, but then also kind of it doesn't affect me as much. But then there's the third level where I walk away and I go, man, there's some that are just fantastic. And I would actually go, if you can be okay with it, I would encourage you to watch this. It's not even just a like for some people it's good, but like so I mentioned Sundance. I think the first time I saw the Babadook was at
Oh yeah.
Sundance.
The
Um,
Australian film.
oh yeah. Australian female filmmaker, fantastic. Like if you
Hmm.
can endure that, I think that film is worth any adult watching at least once.
I didn't think
I
that one was scary at all anyway.
No, no, and
So
that's part of it too. I think it gets like sort of like amped up in people's minds. Sinners is the same way, and I also go back and forth now that I am desensitized. Like I had a PhD class, I required Sinners this last spring to watch, and we were going to analyze and break down. A couple people said, "Can I opt out?" And I go, okay. And then everyone else that did, some even were like, "Ooh, that was," and I was like, "Really?" I'm like, "I thought that was pretty tame. Like, what, you know?" So I'm
I
always
don't think
trying to
it's
go.
scary at all. I
I
don't
don't
think Sinners
either.
is even a horror movie.
No, yeah, I agree. I'm like, I assigned it because of that fact, right? Thinking like, oh, I could go way worse than this. Sinners is a nice like entry level kind of
Hmm.
conversation. It's also really good and entertaining, raising some interesting political, socio-racial things. I
Hmm.
thought so too. Same thing with like Get Out, right? Really important film. And not, I don't think that scary in the classic sense, disturbing in a really important sense, but not uh, stay up at night with nightmares kind of thing, you know? So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
anyway, so all that to say, I think maybe I just, even my categories have been kind of disrupted for how I would even like say I appreciate it, I like it, it affects me. But I do go in and watch far more nowadays than I would have at all before. So and I'm actually now um, I'm kind of like going back and sort of reappreciating a lot of the classics. Um, and some other, well, I wouldn't call them friends, but they're good. I have a good relationship with Chad and Carrie Hayes, and you know they're responsible for basically the most successful series of all time, the Conjuring series. And
And they're Christians
really,
too, right?
yeah, and Christians of a really interesting sense because they are believers in everything. So like
Uh,
I got a chance to go over to their house. We did a screening of one of their films and a talk back, and then we did an interview with them in their house, and they're like showing me all this sort of stuff of like, oh, and these are stories of when they would go do research for some of their films. And like we would talk to Ed and Lorraine Warren, and Lorraine, she would, you know, like we would get demons that would show up on the phone, we would hear them, and you know, then they're showing me on their cell phone, like, look, here's proof of alien life. This dog was cut open in surgery and out came an alien baby. And I'm like, what? So
It's
So
kind of
I'm
like the
like,
National Enquirer.
yes, yes. So that's why I go, they're believers, really sincere, great like individuals. Um, but I'm going, this is sort of like category shattering for me, both as a Christian and a film connoisseur, going, wow, horror for you guys is doing something really interesting, both in terms of how you think of it as a storytelling mechanism, but then even just how you're kind of processing life as a creative, as a filmmaker, and then hoping that an audience will respond in kind to that. And so none of that, I didn't expect any of that kind of going into it, and have just found it really a really rich terrain with a lot of interesting people doing a lot of interesting things with the genre that as you then go back historically, like I rewatched a little while, well, I think it was near Halloween, and it had been a while I watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And if you watch
I've
that
never
original,
seen that one.
oh yeah, well, it had been a long time since I have. Uh, is that I recommend it if you're a student of the genre. But
Hmm.
it is bizarre, but really um, historically rooted in terms of like the pain points of where the United States was in the 70s. And in terms of like the Nixon era, the ramp down from Vietnam, Watergate scandals, uh, gas crises, like there was a spike in gas because there was a shortage, and then the industrialization of a lot of the workforce of America, and that the whole setup of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a family who no longer is out of work because they turned the cattle slaughtering business into a mechanized industrial technologized process. They came up with like
Hmm.
the thing that kills cows immediately with the shot. And that fundamentally changed this entire group of people that were left behind by the advancing technology of society. You go, whoa.
Hmm.
So when you watch it through that lens and then think about what does that mean today? And the reason I watched it is because there's a more contemporary reboot from a few
Yeah.
years ago and just a totally different film. And where I go, like I start getting critical of a film like that is I was like, oh, that was making really interesting political, social uh, commentary through the horror genre. I
Hmm.
would say the more contemporary one is kind of a torture porn.
Right.
It's not doing the same thing. And so if there's a miss for the contemporary one, it's that it missed that opportunity to comment on where are we today?
Yeah.
Who are the people that are left behind, and how might the horror genre help us explore that? And anyway, so that to me, I go, there's so many examples of it happening in really good ways, that those are the kind of films I'm drawn to and really want to talk about.
Yeah. 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 I have so many thoughts, and I've said the same thing so many times to people. Um, like specifically The Conjuring, actually. I wrote a blog recently. I just posted it. It's called Why Friends is More Demonic Than The Conjuring. And
Friends, the TV series.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, oh, great, great. Tell me, say a bit about it. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, let me try to pull it up while I'm talking. But the premise was I've actually said this for years. I just finally wrote it down in blog form. But here it is. I really like the image I came up with for it. The
Oh, that's good.
um
Oh man.
so the because it came up through a conversation with a friend who doesn't like horror, right? And she's like, "Oh, how could you watch that stuff? It's all demonic,
Yeah.
right?" And I'm like, "Okay, I've heard this so many times." Um, but I always try to think like, if I were Satan, if I were the devil, and I was trying to pull people away from God and flourishing and healthy relationships and whatever, would I come out and be like, oh, I'm this big terrifying thing? Or would I do it through like things that seem fun and lighthearted and you can sleep with all your best friends and it doesn't matter
Yep.
and you're so selfish and you come and go
Yep.
and um, like your whole life is about you. You produce almost nothing that gives back to the world.
Yep.
It's like this narcissistic, solipsistic mindset.
Mhm.
And it's pleasure driven, hedonistic, all under the guise of, oh, this show is so harmless and innocent and everyone loves Friends, right? Um, and I'm not necessarily against watching Friends myself,
Sure.
but I'm saying like if you were to compare the two, like horror, like The Conjuring, it says this is evil. When people doesn't the guy like he like killed his family in the house or something
Yeah, well,
before?
there's multiple the whole series. There's multiple different kind of evils, but usually something like that has occurred as the sort of
Yeah, like
start.
well in the first one,
Yeah, yeah,
this guy like killed himself and then or
yep,
killed his whole family, then
yep,
killed himself,
yep.
right?
And I
And
yes, yeah,
so it's like, and then that house is haunted by this evil spirit. So what the Conjuring is doing is saying, hey, this thing is bad.
mhm,
It's evil.
yep.
This is the evil bad thing. We're
Oh
gonna
yeah,
fight it with prayer
yep,
and the power of good.
yep,
Meanwhile, Friends, if you were to point out what's bad
yep.
there, it's far more murky, and you can't
Oh yeah.
distinguish, like, oh, maybe they shouldn't be like, oh, Rachel and Ross fell in love. Oh, that's so sweet.
Mhm.
That's so great. Finally, they're together. They're
Yeah.
not married. They're just hooking up and they're gonna go left and right, hook up with this guy, this girl, like,
Oh yeah.
so in my mind, like, if I were to say, if I'm Satan, which of these two tools am I going to
Mhm.
use to like rip the
Yep.
American public away from God?
Yep.
Obviously, I'm using Friends or New
Yeah. I
Girl
mean,
or anything like that.
yeah. I okay. Well, we could get in the weeds of it. I like New Girl more than Friends in terms of what it does, but so I have a book on television. Actually, it's called Watching TV Religiously. So it's
Oh,
really
nice.
interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting you bring up Friends because I agree with you. I bring up that in particular as an example of exactly what you're talking about, especially if you take the full trajectory of I think there's like 10 seasons of it and who the characters eventually become is not what we would call friends. They
Hmm.
they become like caricatures of themselves in some ways, and they're most of them, exactly what you're saying, are they're not like a thick community of relationship. They're a bunch of sort of like individualistic people trying to, feel good,
Hmm.
through these various pursuits. Um, and I contrast that with a few others. Like I actually contrast it with Parks and Rec as a good example of how like these people that have deep differences actually are, and there's a central character or two that like make it cohesive, and over time they actually become a more loving community
Yeah.
that you wouldn't
Parks
anticipate
and
they
Rec is
into.
great.
Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
but I think you're right. Like the feedback or the pushback I always get when people are like, "How could you think Christianly about horror?" The main and almost 90% of the time, the first that's thrown on my face is, "Well, aren't we told that we should focus on whatever is true and lovely and good and
Yeah.
beautiful? Think on these things." And I go,
Yeah.
"Yes, but do you know what the first word in that list is? Is true." And true, and in nowhere in that list is the word pleasant used. Um, Friends is super pleasant. It's fun. It's entertaining. Like I watched the whole, my wife and I, when we were younger, that was our show, right? Super pleasant, fun, enjoyable, fundamentally fraudulent and false, to your point. Um, the truth, from a Christian perspective, what is true is not pleasant, and often the truth is deeply, profoundly ugly, um, messy, brutally violent. And the reason I say that is because, from a Christian perspective, again, if you're from a different perspective, it would be a different take. But for Christianity, the core truth around which all of reality turns is the most horrific moment of brutal torture and
Yeah.
violence, demonic possession, like everything you could imagine, all lumped into one. And we look at that and we say, not only is that true, but that's beautiful. That is God doing the most beautiful work we could ever imagine. I'm like, wait, how is that? This naked man tortured to death in public view of everyone.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So that's where I go. To your point, there's a scholar. She's a Roman Catholic scholar named Cecilia Gonzalez Andrew. She wrote a book called Bridge to Wonder, and she talks a lot about how art kind of points to beauty and goodness and truth. And I use her category. She says a lot of times people think the opposite of beauty is ugliness. And she's like, nope, that's wrong. Sometimes ugly things are actually very beautiful, meaning they're ugly, but they point you to what we might call capital B beauty.
Yeah,
The cross would be a good example.
sure.
She said the opposite of beauty is actually glamour, because glamour
Mm,
is a self, like inward turning, exactly what you're saying, solipsistic kind of like self-motivated thing. And that is actually the opposite of beauty. The things that are most non-beautiful are the things that like make yourself enamored with yourself above and beyond all things. And I
yeah.
find that a really helpful criterion when it comes to horror to say, you know what? Again, not every horror film. I've seen the Terrifier series.
Oh,
Ah,
I saw the
not
first
worth it.
one and regretted
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Exact. That is the, yes, that when that's your feeling of anything, it's like, okay. But there are many examples where I go, this is brutal, it's difficult, it's important, and it points me in very clear ways to what I would call capital B beauty, or capital T truth, right? And that oftentimes, as you said, requires you to say, oh, there is such a thing as evil in the world, and it has consequences. And if we can't grapple with that, then it's really difficult for us to know what's up, what's down, etc. Yeah, so I'm all in that framework. So sorry, I'm coming a day late and a dollar short to your podcast. You've said it all already. I'm just late to the game of horror.
No, no, no. I don't know if I've ever talked about it so much in depth on the podcast. I've definitely written a bunch of blogs about it. Um, because I don't want to say it's like defending Crumb Hill, which that's my tank top. I
Yeah.
wasn't just
Oh,
wearing the
nice.
tank top to flex. I was like,
Do
gotta represent the brand.
can I get some merch that
Yeah.
purchasable online? Oh, cool. I like the font and stuff. That's pretty cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything's on crumbhill.com. And I didn't
Okay.
do that. We didn't plan that just to plug it, but I have it all sitting here just in case it came up. But we got the Crumb Hill coloring
Oh,
book.
I love it, man.
This is the newest book, The Crumb Wars. This
That's
is
great.
also my first ever novel. So the whole
Oh,
thing is a
awesome.
novel. Um,
I,
and then there's the OG Crumb Hill book, which
that's
was the
right.
very first one.
Hey, tell me a bit
Um,
about that. So, when you made that coloring book, for example, do you have an illustrator or using AI or like how are you making that stuff?
yeah, so I make all the pictures with AI, but then I'll
Okay.
like tweak them all and um, and all the videos and everything. I don't know if you watch them all, but
Yeah,
yeah, all the
not all
books
of
are
them.
full of tons of pictures and
Yeah, I
um,
love it.
so I tried to make things like as so the thing about Crumb Hill is it's I try to make it as scary as possible,
Mhm.
but the rules are there's no death, there's no gore, there's no violence, there's no nudity, profanity, or demonic stuff. And so people are often like, how do you make something scary then? And I'm
Yeah,
like, well, you gotta get real creative with it for one, and you also have to rely on people's imagination, kind of put
yeah,
things like there's this one here,
yeah.
uh, like rely on mystery, I think a lot, because like even stuff like this, like the
Oh yeah.
masks
Oh
that they
yeah.
wear a lot are like super creepy
Uh-huh.
because you don't know what's under them.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I realized that
And
even if you just throw a mask on anyone, it makes them instantly way more
that
creepy.
and
So,
that's timely. It's super timely. Who gets to wear a mask and why and under what conditions and what that communicates to people. I love
mhm.
it. I don't know if you'd be open to it. I'm a I'm an ADHD mind, and so I have like way too many projects going on at once.
Yeah.
But I've always had this screenplay in mind, and then I was like, no, it's a novel, no, it's a screenplay. But I broke down and over the winter break, just did a draft of of a novel. I and it's a sort of it's not horror per se, but sort of post-apocalyptic. If you said, did you ever see Children of Men? Do you know that movie?
Yeah.
This,
Inarritu, is that who,
yeah,
or was it
yeah,
the other
yeah.
Mexican
No,
director?
yeah, yeah. It's
Cuarón?
Quran. Yes, I think it's Quran. Oh no, now that you said Interatu, I'm like I'm questioning myself. Anyway,
Wait, let me look.
but if
It's
that
one or
if
the
that
other.
meets the Hunger Games, if you mash those two together, that's sort of my novel. And my struggle with it is I actually see it visually. It's pretty short, it's pretty fast paced, and I ask you how you do it is because I'd love to like make it visual in its final sort of output. So anyway, offline we can chat. I may send it to you and see
Yeah,
what
that'd
you
be cool.
it's if it could be a kind of Crumb Hill-ish type of a thing and the way that you're doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
but
Quaron, by the way.
it is Quran. Okay, good. Man, that's such a good. I mean, even that, like it's not horror per se, but to your point about how you um, develop and create a sense of suspense and fear and dread, there are multiple sort of his cinematography is what makes that movie disturbing. If you just kind of mapped out the plot, it's a little scary, like oh, that's tough. But the
It's
way,
intense.
yeah, but the intensity of it is a lot in terms of his framing, the foreground, background, like what he's allowing you to see, what he's not.
Hmm.
In my mind, I can never escape that the scene where you're in a car, they're they're going backwards as fast as they can in a car, and there's like hordes of people descending down the hill, right, to capture these people. Like that sense of dread. No, there's no nudity, there's no violence, there's nothing. It's just we're reversing in a car and hordes of people are running at us. And when I watch
Hmm.
horror, very severe visuals and stuff, that's the kind of dread and claustrophobia and everything that I think I told you. I rewatched one of your things. I'm like, oh, I remember that. And you, of course, said, oh, that's old. And sure, the
Hmm.
technology changes advances, but that sensibility holds, like it endures because that's what makes us that's what puts us on alert, right?
Hmm.
Those kind of psychological cues bring us to this state. And actually, as I said before about the COVID, there's a lot of research, especially with like adolescents, teenagers, young adults, um, that the psychological research compares it often to it's called comparative psychology. So like how do human minds develop in relationship to animal minds, and what are the differences?
Hmm.
How can we learn? And some people go like, oh, look at young antelope in the Serengeti, and they'll be out on the plain, and the entire herd, maybe it's a herd of antelope, whatever that is, group, gaggle, something.
Yeah.
Um, they can see the pride of lions, right? Like right out here. And the lions, everybody knows the lions aren't in their eating moment. They're just sitting there because lions are lazy. After they eat, they go and they just chill, apparently, for a while. But they're still lions, right? And what young adolescent antelope will do is they'll gather together in groups and they will kind of like start running close and coming, running closer, coming back, running up closer to the lion and coming back in what they understand to be a safe environment. And what the psychologists say is there's something similar to what adolescents are doing when they go into a theater and they're like, we know we're actually, our physical self is not under threat here. We're not, nothing bad is going to happen. But we're like, we together as a group are kind of like going up to the line and coming back, going up to the line and coming back. How do I as an individual, how do we as a group respond to a threat that in the theater feels real, right? Like the movie, there's no psychological difference between the axe murder on the screen and an actual axe murder. But the environment is one where you get to rehearse how
Hmm.
you respond. You get to develop capacities to respond in ways, and you're doing that in relationship to your peers, right? So they're kind of like guiding you, and it can go poorly. Like you can be like, you're a pansy or something like that for not, by the way, I just said pansy. Is that an okay word to say? I don't even know. Um,
I think so.
yeah, I think as I said, I'm like, I don't think that's a bad word anymore. But that can be bad, but it also is the way that, human groups and societies kind of grow, right? Like, what are the things that are appropriate or not in terms of how we respond to threats? And I think that's a big part of what's happening in horror is the filmmaker knows psychologically these are the things that sort of trigger that threat response in people. And the best filmmakers can do that. It doesn't matter what the content is. You don't have to just murder people senselessly. And Carey Brothers actually spoke a lot to me about this of to the imagination. It's like you need to know the structure of fear and how to then elicit it in an audience. And so it's way scarier to have like, a string going into a closet that's darkened and not know what's in there, never see what's in there. And in the moment that that string sort of like wiggles on its own, like that's all you have to do. And
Hmm.
all of our imagination like imports everything else.
Right.
So they were really big on it's not about gore, it's not about violence, it's not about nudity, it's about the structure of fear and how
Yeah.
you evoke that in humans.
Yeah. I say the same thing often because I'm a scuba diver too.
Hmm.
And like, but I also have like thalassophobia, the fear of deep dark
Oh,
waters.
oh
And
wow.
so I'm always like, honestly, it's not that scary when you get down there because you're just
Sure.
exploring the reef and stuff. And the crazy thing is, like, I dive in Belize a lot, and the sharks just come right up to you and you pet them, and they're not scary. But what's scarier is looking out into like the like 60 meters away from you, where it just turns into blue nothingness and you can't see anything. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
like it's funny because what am I scared of coming out of the abyss? A shark.
Mhm.
But there's
Yep.
sharks all around me right now and I'm petting them. So what's
Yep.
scarier? Just the unknown. Like even though logically the scariest potential thing that could come out of there is right here in front of me and I'm
Yeah,
petting it,
right there.
but the deep dark blueness is scarier. So I try
I'm
to
gonna
play on
get,
that as much as I can too.
oh yeah, I'm gonna get this wrong because as I'm saying it, I'm like, am I misremembering? But um, I think actually is both Alien and Jaws. A similar thing happened on set. For Alien, Ridley Scott first saw uh, the dailies of the what their alien looked like. Now, this is back in I think that came out in 79 or 80, but with effects and makeup and costuming, saw the xenophobe. I can't remember what it's called, but
Yeah.
the alien, right? And he's like, "Oh, that's looks silly. Like when we show it, it's laughable. It's not scary." And so he made a in like in the process decision to like remove it as much from on-screen presence as possible. And
Oh yeah.
instead use sound, use darkness, use everything else to make that scary. In Jaws, if I'm remembering correctly, they had a full animatronic shark that they were going to use in the early drafts, and it broke. Like early on, it broke, and so they shifted and had to actually adjust. And part of the reason that it's almost never seen at first is actually because it broke, but it turned out they were like, oh, that's way scarier
Yeah.
just the idea of the shark is far and with just two notes, just add two notes.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
it's a minor interval, and now the human mind just runs amok. And so it's exactly your point of looking out at the ocean, seeing thing is way more scary than apparently the actual shark coming to like chomp your head off.
Right. They're like dogs.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
crazy. So really, you're petting sharks there in the
Oh
ocean
yeah.
as they
I have
Man,
tons of
that's
videos of me just petting them with my GoPro. I watched this video the other night. Have you heard of a movie called Possum? Does that look
yes, I have
familiar?
not seen it. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But I haven't seen it yet. No.
I just watched that. Uh, and like initially, I was having that same thought when I was watching it because this is his puppet that comes to life,
Oh
kind of.
man.
I mean,
Okay.
it's one of
Yeah.
those where it's like his puppet is symbolic for trauma for something.
Yeah.
Um, and he always carries it around in a bag. And it
Hmm.
has like those long, crazy spider legs with a human head for anyone who's
Oh.
listening on the audio and can't see it. And so the first couple scenes, he'll like set the bag down and then like it'll unzip itself and some of the spider legs just come out and then it cuts so you can't see it. But it's
Oh,
only probably like a third of the way into the film you see the whole puppet for the first time. And same thing, it's way less scary. Like,
yeah,
don't get me wrong, that puppet is one of the freakiest things I've ever seen
yeah.
as far as like a movie monster goes. Like this creepy human bald
Yeah.
head on like the I hate
Well,
spiders to begin with too, so that adds to it. But I'm like, they could have drawn that out way longer and like shown the legs like escaping around a corner or something. But once you see the whole
yeah.
thing, I mean, it's still creepy because there's some scenes, this isn't a spoiler, I don't think, where he's like, he threw it into the ocean and the next morning
Oh,
he wakes up and it's on the pillow right next to him, like in bed. And you're like, ugh, it's just so creepy. But it does
well,
lose some of the
yeah.
terror once you can see the whole
Yep.
thing.
So
So,
not to get too theoretical, but a French film theorist who focused mostly on um, film sound. He's written multiple books on sound and sound design in film. His name is Michael Chion, and it's either in his book Audiovision or this other book is escaping me. But he's French, so he names this the acousmestre, which is the acoustic presence. And it's really interesting where he says he describes exactly what you're saying is that presence, that creature, that evil, that monster is off screen. So like if for those of you who are not watching, but like now I move my hand out here. So here's where it's coming from, but we can't see it. We can hear it though. So film is really unique in being able to give us the sound of that terror. And his theory, which I think is right, is as soon as now it becomes present on screen, that immediately disempowers it. And in a
mhm.
lot of like horror films, even the narrative, the plot, you finally see the thing at the very end when it's defeated or something. And because its power is actually drawn from being heard but not seen. And that's where he calls it the presence of an absence. So it's
Hmm.
it's present in its absence. The visual absence, where is it? What's it, why is it terrorizing us? But it's affecting us from off screen.
Mm.
And there's so many films and characters and whatnot that follow that. And I do think you're right that to a person, that filmmaker's choice as to when to fully reveal it is really big. I'm a big Stranger Things fan, and my critique of the later season, I actually liked it all. I'm a chronic appreciator, so no hate here. But I think the first season was the best, in part because it delayed that visual representation of the Demogorgon until the last minute.
Mm.
Other before then, you never really saw it. Later
Yeah.
seasons, they were showing us everything like right away, and I found it less scary,
Yeah.
even though content was, I think, a little more intense. So yeah, I think that's right on in terms of as soon as you see the thing in its full, yeah, it's like that being said, I just finally last night watched Good Luck, no, uh, Good Luck Don't Die. Have fun, Good Luck Don't Die. Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen that one.
Oh, interesting film. It's not horror, but it's sci-fi. But the end, the most sort of
Oh
like
wait,
horror.
what's it about?
Um,
I may have.
Basically, a guy from the future comes and has to recruit a bunch of people to stop a kid from making an AI that destroys the world. Really fun, interesting, provocative film.
Oh,
Um,
is this Sam Rockwell?
yes, yes, yeah, and he's
No,
great
I
in it.
didn't see that one
Oh
yet, but
yeah,
I saw the trailer.
yeah, really good.
Yeah.
But at one point, this isn't a spoiler, but near the end, one of the creepiest parts are all these creatures of this kid that come out that are kind of like what you're describing. It's like a mechanical spider with like a baby doll head on top, and there's stuff.
Hmm.
What it reminded me of was Toy Story 1, where
Yep.
all of Sid's toys come out, right? And so there is that fundamental creepiness of like the category violations. I'm putting two things that shouldn't go together.
Yeah.
Uh, and and sometimes I want to say showing that is actually very creepy. It's not necessarily threatening or frightening in the same way, But that spider you're describing, even though I've seen it, like I imagine in my head one of those toys coming out from Sid's bed. I'm just like, no, thank you. I don't, that's all
Yeah.
bad. And it's very
Yeah,
fast.
I do that with Crumb Hill a lot. Is I'm like, what two things can I mix together that would be really creepy?
Oh
And you
man.
probably know this too, but there's this interesting idea that in the Torah law, a lot
Hmm.
of the things that are forbidden, like for food specifically, or they're
Yep.
unclean animals, are things that
Yep.
violate those categorical laws.
Yep.
Like ostriches are unclean because they're birds that aren't in the air, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what are they like shellfish? Like, are they fish or are they on land or what do
Yeah.
they do? They can't crawl
Yeah.
and be in the ocean, so they're unclean.
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that stuff is interesting.
I think, and so there's a book by, okay. So I do theology. That's very important. I'm a Christian. That's all good. Um, Thinking about the rabbis and how they understand that. Interesting. A lot of times I'll go like, ooh, there's interesting psychological research on this too that reinforces that. And I don't say it to like undermine the authority of that tradition. I think they're sort of like intuiting something that nowadays we go, oh, now we have science to kind of like reaffirm that. And a guy named Jonathan Haidt, a lot of people know him from, he wrote a thing called The Anxious Generation recently.
Mhm.
It's all about social media. But before that, he wrote um, The Righteous Mind. And it looks at basically people who identify as conservative or liberal in terms of what their moral categories are.
Mhm.
And he does this really interesting study. And hopefully, because this is a podcast about horror and people are fine with it, just trigger warning, I'm going to say something that's kind of scandalous. Um, but he goes to like a, I can't remember which one, but like what you would imagine is like a super liberal progressive university, right? And he's talking to like grad students who are, you know, imagine themselves as like on the leading edge of progressivism, in terms of like what public morality should be, what's right and what's wrong, etc.
Sure.
And so they are going to be prone to say like, well, it depends, and everybody kind of gets to make their own morality and blah 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 blah. And then, but there are some things, and it's like, okay, well, as long as the decision you make doesn't harm another person, that okay,
Right.
yeah, that's a thing. As long as there's consent, to do something, then that's okay. So they have some commitments. So he's like, okay, great. So he has them name it all. And he goes, all right, so I just want you to tell me, is it right or wrong? Let's imagine there's a chicken farmer and he raises chickens and he humanely slaughters them to feed other people. He doesn't, and they're like, okay, yeah, that's okay. He's like, all right, great. Now, just before he sells the chickens to his customers, he decides to have sex with those chickens. Um, and is that okay or not? And they revolt. They're like, no, that's horrible. That's like totally immoral. And he's like, why? Nobody's hurt. It's the chicken is dead. They were humanely raised and used for like giving life to other humans. There's no consent even involved. Like it's just for the farmer's pleasure. Like, why would you do that? Well, and there, because it's like there is just something that says you shouldn't have sex with chicken carcasses. That's just wrong. And but
Yeah.
they had no other thing to point to say here's why that's wrong. And I say that because I think you're right. Like sometimes with horror, maybe any storytelling, but horror, when it puts those things together, it's tapping into like an intuitive, pre-critical, like ickiness where we go, I can't tell you why. I have no reason or rationality, but that shouldn't be. That shouldn't
Right.
happen in the world. And I think that's really a tool of horror genre that other genres don't have at their disposal. It's like throwing that in our face and going, well, and I say this a lot about like slasher films. Some people are like, there's just no redemptive point of slasher films. And I go, well, the very fact that the brutalization of bodies violates your sensibilities actually demonstrates that you intuitively think that bodies are sacred. There's something that shouldn't be violated. So when you
Hmm.
see that, you say, I don't know why, but that's just wrong. bodies should not be treated that way, especially human bodies. And so that's where I think that mashup of our intuitive sort of revolt or disgust at certain things kind of maps on psychologically to what our theological forebears have said of like, hey, some things shouldn't go together. And if you
Yeah.
put them together, something interesting is going to happen. Something maybe unwanted will emerge.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I have a similar question that I've asked people in the past, which is like, if I'm ever in that type of conversation, I always say like, well, if anything's permissible, as long as no one's getting hurt, why can't a brother and sister get married? Like, as long as they don't have kids, let's assume they're not going to have
Yeah.
kids. Why couldn't they get married? And that one, ironically, I don't even know if that's technically forbidden in the Bible, but
Yeah. Um,
uh,
that's a very good question. I don't, well, especially because the lines get very blurred. We don't know where everybody post Cain and Abel even came from.
sure.
So, like, but then there's a lot of like, it's almost close to that with most of the patriarchs. Like, you are literally supposed to go marry within your family. Is it a cousin? Is it a
Hmm.
first cousin? Like, so yeah, I think you're right. But there is
Like,
um,
where do you draw the line of what types of relationships are right and wrong?
exactly.
But
Yes.
that's a whole different
Yep.
conversation.
It is. It is.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, there was one other thing. Oh, going way back to your Philippians 4 comment,
Yeah.
about what is true and right and noble
Yeah.
and good. I'm always like, well, if you can't read violent or scary things, you shouldn't read a good chunk of the Bible itself. Like, is Paul saying, like, don't read your Bible, like, only read the happy parts of your Bible?
Yeah.
Like you said,
I,
that means you don't read the crucifixion.
yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah, I don't know.
so within, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush, but within evangelicalism in the United States, I think it would be fair to say, on the whole, people go to Easter very quickly. And I understand that. Easter's important. Like, I just want to be on the record, Easter's important. But you don't get Easter without Good Friday.
Right.
Uh, you just cannot get there. And unless and a lot of like non-liturgical churches and stuff don't even do a Good Friday service. But the reason those exist and should end actually in utter despair. Because on Good Friday, this is the moment, Chesterton would say that if the atheists want a God, there's no better God than the one who for a moment apostatized against God's self. Why, Father, have you abandoned me? Like, what, and full stop, and
Mm.
that's it. We like to quickly go to like, oh, but wait, and you'll hear even
But
people say
Sunday's
like, no,
coming.
yeah, Sunday's coming, or they'll even say, no, no, Jesus was just quoting part of it. If you read the rest, clearly he knew what was saying, But no,
Yeah.
that's like, really, is he proof texting like Jesus on the, um, we've got to develop the sensibility to like sit with it because of the Bible, because of the story itself, not because I want darkness and brutality, like, but because that's actually baked in to the equation. And I think you're right that when people do that, our rituals, our liturgies, our training all point us away from that. And the result, it's understandable, but the result is we lose the capacity, we lose the sort of muscle memory to sit in that darkness. And the reason I think that's a loss, and when I get back to why I go like, man, horror is actually a theologically important genre, is because we have a whole group of people, and my expertise is in North America. So like globally, I think this is probably also true, but I can't say for sure. But at least in the North America, a whole group of people, Christians and non-Christians, who are going like, I look out at the world, and it is dark, and it is brutal, and it is violent, and it is scary. Um, and right now, a lot of them process that by going to horror films, understandably. And I say, as Christians, we have the best horror story of all. Why wouldn't we double down on that as opposed to sanitize it? And so that means for me, I actually look for those places in scripture that are we normally don't even talk about. I helped edit a book, a devotional, actually similar to what you've done. We partnered with Alabaster. I don't know if you know that group, but they
They make the
create
nice Bibles or something.
exactly,
Yeah.
yes. And it's funny because they said yes, and they helped us print and create a book called "Don't Look Away: The Horrors of Holy Scripture." And it's 6 or 7 devotionals, all focused on the horror texts of the Bible. And
There's
it's
more
things
than
like,
seven, I'd say.
oh yes, well, we just had space for that. They're gonna do a second book here pretty soon because there's tons. I mean, like all throughout. Um, but all underscoring your point, which is you you cannot read the Bible if what you only want is something that is pleasant and reassuring and nice, because you cannot tell me that when a man takes his what the passage calls sometimes concubine or whatever, and he puts her out into a marauding horde who wants to have sex with his host, and he says, "Take
The
this woman,"
angel. Yeah.
the angel, right? And they rape her to death. And then on the doorstep, she finally collapses in death. And he says, "The way that I'm going to get all of the tribes of Israel to be super pissed about what they just did is I'm going to chop her up into 12 pieces and mail her body parts to all the different kingdoms." Like,
Hmm.
what do I like? That is insane. That's in
Yeah.
the Bible. And not only is it in the Bible, but we are called not just to know that exists, but to meditate on that story.
Yeah.
What does it mean to meditate on that kind of story? And that to me is why I go, yeah, you'd have to basically wipe out 50%. I mean, that's overgeneralization, but a huge chunk of the Bible if you're going to say, I can only read things that are pleasant,
Yeah.
and only pleasant things are true, even within our own sacred text.
Yeah. Yeah. Judges 19 is always one of the go-tos. There's the Witch of Endor in First Samuel, conjuring up Samuel from the dead,
Yeah.
or Jesus
Oh,
and the demoniac and
yeah.
the tombs in Mark 5, I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and all the pigs jump off the cliff. You're like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Um,
that's in that devotional. The Judge 19 is a devotional. We haven't gotten to all the others. There's the Witch of Endor is a great example. Any sort of demon possession, any sort of supernatural,
mhm.
even down to like uh, you know um, Elijah and the prophets of Baal, like they're all just assassinated, and then everybody else gets murdered.
And they
Or
were like cutting themselves open, I think, too,
yeah, like
beforehand.
it's crazy. And then or Elisha, he's like he calls a couple bears to like maul some kids because they call him bald. Like what?
Yeah.
Like it's so
My dad loves
it's
that passage.
oh yeah, it's great. So I have I'm doing a lot of stuff in comedy right now and like humor, and there's a good bit about Cain and Abel. And it's like, okay, the fourth human or the third human ever murdered 25% of the human population. That's more than like Pol Pot and Hitler and like cancer and everything all
Like the
put
Black
together.
Death. Yeah.
Exactly. Like what? So if you were one of the other people, you had a 33% chance of being murdered.
You're
Like
next.
that's pretty intense if that's the or Noah. Noah, right? Like if you watched Russell Crowe's Darren Aronofsky's Noah,
Yeah, with the bodies floating and
yeah,
stuff.
it's just like that is a horse. Like imagine God drowning to death everybody but 4 or 5 people.
Hmm.
That is brutal. And instead we tell it as a flannel graph story
Yeah,
about
yeah,
even after, then he gets drunk and gets naked and something happens in the tent. We
yeah.
don't know what it is with one of his sons, who he then curses for every generation. And it's
Right.
like there's like some sort of violence, maybe even sexual violence.
Sure.
Um, and what do we do
Classic
with it?
ham.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to your point, we don't, and by ignoring those texts, a couple things happens. One, we misunderstand our own sacred literature.
Yeah.
But in my view, the way our hermeneutic, right, like the way we interpret texts, um, it maps onto various things in our life. So it's not just the Bible. So we learn how to interpret the Bible in a certain way, and then we turn to other texts like horror films or films in general, and that same interpretive instinct comes into play so that we reject outright certain things that just make us uneasy, in part because we have no categories for understanding them. And so
Yeah.
part of my objective is to say, when we go and we like ask, okay, how might I understand this horror film in a different way, not just reject it out of hand, but how might I like interpret it such that it like I understand it fully? um, that actually shapes the way that I read my own scriptures. And
Yeah.
that's what I would call reversing the hermeneutical flow, right? Like, how does this process help me do justice to the text that otherwise I might actually be mistreating?
Yeah. 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 I love it. I think, or one line I used in a blog post a long time ago was a G-rated religion has nothing to say to an R-rated world, something like that.
Yep.
And
Yeah, that's great.
yeah, because like the world around us is not G-rated, not at all.
No, not at all.
And so I'm glad that the Bible that we study is on par to speak realistically to the world that we live
Yeah,
in.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
And
and horror movies really do the same thing too. Like I feel like
yeah.
I wrote a blog post a while ago called "There's Truth and Terror,"
Oh,
and
yeah.
because if you think about it, like every creature on Earth kind of lives in a constant state of terror. And we're the
Yep.
only ones who kind of numb ourselves and distract ourselves and comfort ourselves out of that
Yep.
by watching Friends and New Girl. When,
Yep.
like, in reality, if you leave your house at night, no matter where you live, if you're in a city, if you're in the middle of the country, it's scary out there. We're the only
Yep.
people that have kind of insulated ourselves and made little bubbles where we can live and not be scared of everything else in the
Oh,
universe
yeah.
because most of the universe exists in a state of permanent nighttime. So,
Yeah.
like,
Well,
to me,
maybe you
like,
know this or not, but there's a whole field of psychology called terror management theory.
hmm,
And it exactly what you just said, which is humans, distinct from any other organism or creature, like we are primarily motivated not just by fear, we fear we're gonna die, but what we do is we create all of these projects that allow us to completely ignore it.
hmm,
And the projects we do, and so some of the like the secular terror management theory, they go, religion is one of them. The way you cope with your fear of death is that you create this project of like, oh, well, but I'm going to live eternally, right? I'm going
yeah,
to live forever. And that's how I manage death and ignore it. And I say, well, maybe, but actually, what it is are these other projects. So I want to make a piece of art that endures forever. I want to start a company that endures forever. I'm
yeah,
Elon Musk and I want to populate Mars, right?
yeah,
Like those are these like projects that are all designed to keep me away from that core fear that I'm going to die. Like I
yeah,
don't have a choice. So I that is totally true in terms of what you're kind of intuiting or saying in terms of like human psychology.
yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah. And so I think that that's one of the true things that horror does when it's done well is remind us of, um, if nothing else, that we are going to die and that there are parts of the
Yep.
universe that we have to be scared of.
Yep.
Um, And then, even the Proverbs say that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So it's
Yes.
like we're instructed to fear
Yes.
the right things.
Yeah.
So, and then
Well,
where is it?
maybe the
First Samuel, where it says like God dwells in deep darkness, and you're like, oh, there's
yes.
something about him also. Like I feel the thalassophobia. It's like there's something about that that's like
Well,
profoundly terrifying.
maybe two things to say to kind of like put a button on it and to come back to the very beginning of your of what you asked. One is I think it's Psalm 119. Don't quote me on this. It's in the Psalms, so that's correct, but whether it's 119. But it's where the psalmist is saying like your ways of knowing are so vast, I could never know them, right? And if I made my bed in the heavens, you're there in the depths of Sheol. And then it says
That's 139. Yeah.
that's 139. 119, I think, though, says something like um, even the dark. is as light to you. Uh,
Hmm.
and and what we bring to that is something like, oh, what God does is he goes into the darkness and he lights it up, right?
Yeah.
And so we should do the same. We should go into these dark places and light it up. That's not actually what 119, I think, says. It says that God literally can see in the dark,
Mm.
meaning maybe what our calling is not to go in and be like, there are times where we need to be a light in the darkness, light on the hill, blah, 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 blah. But there are also times where we need to realize that we need to find a way to be comfortable in the darkness. Because when we do, that might actually be where we find God. And I think that's a really interesting thought in terms of like what Christian presence looks like. Can we enter dark spaces and be comfortable enough there to say, God's at work here? We don't need to be like a beacon of light. We need to sit in the darkness with people because that's actually where God meets other people. So that's kind of
Yeah.
one. The other, and now I'm losing it. It was something that you said at the beginning, darkness, light. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So back to your very first question of like, why did I get into this? And what did I learn? I thought when I said, okay, I'm going to dive in, I'm going to like do a deep dive into horror. What I first had in mind was the passage, which is perfect love casts out fear. So I thought, if there's any redeemable quality about horror literature, horror film, horror genre, it's going to be some way in which it helps me like eliminate fear from my life. It's going to help me like expose and eradicate it. But over time, I realized, and Babadook was a great example. I realized actually there's also tons of biblical testimony to say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Well, that means it's not fear per se that's the problem. It's where that fear is directed. And
Hmm.
so much of our lives, we are ourselves, but then also all the other powers that be are trying to stoke our fears about all the wrong things.
Yeah.
You should be afraid about immigrants. Immigrants are going to come and like destroy your society. They're going to eat your pets. Be afraid, right?
Yeah.
When in fact we go, wait a minute, you should fear the one, don't fear the one who can like, affect your physical self, like fear the one that can affect your soul. That's
Yeah.
God. We don't have an appropriate fear of the one in whom all of our fears and desires and hopes find their source.
Yeah.
And that is actually what I found for me really helpful as going into this horror genre is it helped me go like, oh, the best of horror helps me disciple my fears. Doesn't eradicate it, eliminate it. It actually helps direct it to the one where all of my fears find their sort of resolution. And to me, that is the kind of like lesson I learned and why I titled the podcast in the book, Be Afraid. It's to say, like, it's not about eliminating fear, it's about fearing rightly. Who
Yeah.
are we actually fearing, and where are those places where our fears are leveraged to ends that actually aren't helpful?
Yeah. Yeah. That's super good. Yeah. Yeah. My, one of my other loves in life is heavy metal stuff. And so
Oh, yeah.
I'm all like, that when I started doing tattoos, that was one of the first ones I tattooed across my toes, heavy metal, because it's
Oh,
five and
wow.
five letters. Because I
Do
just,
you
I
do
love
your
it.
own
And
tattoos? You're putting them on
yeah.
yourself?
Yeah. I'm a tattoo artist on the side too. And
Ah,
so, like,
okay.
you can tell I just
Well,
get flack from Christians left, right, and
I'll,
center.
my a couple of years ago, I shifted to go. All my tattoos are travel based, and so where I go places, I get souvenir tattoos. So if I go to Sundance in January, I'm gonna come to your place and get a
There you
souvenir
go.
Denver
Deal.
or Colorado tattoo.
Yeah, we'll make it scary.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
But yeah, so so obviously I get crapped on from Christians like all over the place for tattoos, heavy metal, and horror. But yeah, I love like in the early 2010s especially, there was like a huge boom in the Christian metal scene where tons of bands like For Today, The Devil Wears Prada, August Burns Red, all these bands were blowing up. And they said, we want to be the light in the dark places. And like,
Mhm.
I loved it. And it wasn't because they forced them to listen to Jeremy Camp. They went to where
Yeah.
they were and they were into the same stuff they were. And then they were making the heaviest music, you know?
Oh yeah.
Um, they just weren't cussing, hooking up with girls, drinking, doing drugs and all that
No.
stuff. But yeah, I think there's something I love about being in those scenes where it's like these people, I just love them. And it's not like, oh, I'm better than them. I'm going to lift them up to
No.
know what I know. It's like I just love hanging out here, you know? But
It's
yeah.
very Jesus-y. Like
Yeah.
this is what's so ironic, and I'll confess, I don't totally get it. I get it, but I don't. And that is literally Jesus was accused of being friends of sinners and tax collectors, right?
Yeah,
Like
Luke 7.
the accusation was you're hanging out with the wrong people.
Hmm.
And
You're a
that's
drunkard
now
and a
part,
glutton.
yeah, like that's a part of our sacred scriptures now. So that someone would come to you and say, you're hanging out with the wrong people is like so tone deaf. Um,
Hmm.
I I'm with you. Like my, you know, I don't know if they're my favorite. I have a handful of top favorites, but Tool is up there. And I'm just like, at a certain point, I almost thought they made like a compact with Satan, so I couldn't listen to them because they were so good. Um,
Hmm.
but I'm like a Tool, Pearl Jam, Nirvana. That's sort of my era. Um, Rage Against the Machine. Like these are my things that have shaped my imagination. Okay. Um, should I not be in that space? Like that seems insane to me from a Christian perspective. But where it comes down now more recently is I've been doing a lot of like stand-up comedy. And so I'll go into open mics. I'll go to stand-up comedy classes. And everybody there is their material is like horribly not suitable for work. Definitely not suitable for church.
Hmm.
But these are people. I remember distinctly a stand-up class I went to, and there's a guy that said, "Listen, I struggle with suicidal ideation. I struggle with self-esteem, like all these things, and I just need a place where I can like kind of like have a community." And that stand-up instructor later talked to me, um, and he openly we were talking about like the various mental health issues of the group. And he's like, is there a place? I just wish there's a place where like guys could get together and talk about the stuff of life in real and vulnerable ways and kind of like encourage each other. Does that
Yeah.
exist? And I was like, yeah, it's called church, right? So,
Yeah.
um, but the problem is the church isn't in the darkness of the bar, this,
Yeah.
or dive bar on a Saturday night at 11 p.m. in LA because they're so offended and clutching their pearls.
Hmm.
At the same time, those very people are literally coming to me, at least, and saying, is there such a thing as a community of people who would walk alongside me in my pain, in my darkness, in my angst, and love me
Yeah.
regardless of who I am? And that's where currently for me I'm at, and it sounds like for you too, with like metal and other things of like, man, there are people who are desperate for what supposedly the church thinks they offer. But right now, whether it's because of structural issues or something else, we're kind of like boats passing in the night. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's sort of my life calling of saying like, how do I bring those together? Because I think the church
Hmm.
actually offers something really helpful, but only if we're willing to kind of get over ourselves in terms of
Yeah.
like our sensibilities, how we're offended, etc., and really just be there, sit there in the darkness with people, whether it's in metal, whether it's in stand-up comedy, whatever.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I was saying it's funny because I was preaching on Friday because my job right now is I'm a chaplain.
Oh, yeah,
So I was preaching on Friday
yeah.
and I often as for the job sit in on a lot of like AA meetings and Sexaholics
Yep.
Anonymous meetings, Narcotics Anonymous meetings, stuff like that. And I always say those meetings are, I think, so much more like how church should be
Yep.
than church is because your ticket to get in the door at an AA meeting is having a problem,
Yep.
right? Like you don't show up, and then once you're
Yep.
all seated in the room, you look around and you're like, everyone in here is in the same boat as me because they have problems and issues.
Yep.
Whereas at church, you put on your best clothes and show up and act like you don't have any problems. And it's
Yep.
like, man, imagine how much more effective and impactful
Oh
church would
yeah.
be for so many people if it was formatted more like that. And I don't know
Oh
how
yeah.
you'd go about doing that. My favorite church I ever went to was here in Denver called Scum of the Earth. That was the name of the
Yep.
church.
Know
I
that
don't know if
well.
you've heard of it,
I have.
but I taught there for like a year as they were kind of shutting down and going out of business, unfortunately. And they were running on volunteers, and I helped preach a bunch of times there, and I loved it because it was so real. And it's like no one here like dolled themselves up to come and perform at church. Like they're smoking cigarettes outside the door and then going into church. And
Yep. Yep.
it was amazing. But yeah,
No, you're
so yeah. Anyway,
you're speaking
I
my
feel like
love
we could talk
language.
for a long time,
Oh
but
yeah. We
we should
could.
wrap
We
up
could.
here.
Yeah.
It's
Last two
been a
things
really
I'll say
great
in response to that
conversation.
is number one, your chaplaincy thing is right. I think that Christian presence in the world moving forward, the main model is chaplaincy. So I'm ministering to people who they may have Christian convictions, they may have no convictions, they may have who cares, but they themselves need spiritual um, mentorship, leadership, whatever. Chaplaincy is the model. And the church hasn't quite figured that out. And so I think you're right. I helped plant a church in Colorado Springs back in the 90s called Vanguard Church. And Scum of the Earth is similar to that. And the same thing. It's like we love Jesus, but we hated institutions and we loved rock and roll. So if you put those in
Yeah.
a blender, that's what it was. And so meeting people where they're at, and saying like the 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 gateway to coming in is you have a problem, as opposed to the problem is the thing that makes us uncomfortable. That I think is a shift we can make possible, but it's difficult.
Mhm.
And we haven't developed those as a community, but I think it's the right way. I think it's the way forward.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for taking the time
Yeah,
and chatting with me. This was super
sure.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully I'll get to meet you
Um,
when you come out here and I'll give you
yeah.
some ink.
All right. Sounds great. I'll start right now thinking what the project will be. Probably one of my daughters. They all each want to name my next tattoo. And so it'll probably be something they want me to get. And I'll see if you can.
Okay,
So,
nice.
all
Cool,
right.
man. Well, thanks
Cool.
again. I'll talk to you
Yep.
soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right, peace.